to get physical, to basically attack. And then it was a communication of how did that feel or why or this, and then to understand it.
Right, yeah, post-intervention, after the intervention itself. And then we would ask various questions like, what were you thinking when that happened? What were you feeling emotionally when that happened? What were you feeling physically when that happened?
Hello, welcome to the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast. My name is James Cox, and I have a special guest back with me today. This is Chief Senior Grandmaster Dr. Gerald Chavez from the Albuquerque, New Mexico area. Now, Kajukembo with the M sometimes can be a confusion with people who don't understand Kajukembo with the N. And the late Ali'i Donald Nahulewa, before he had passed, left you in charge of this organization, the American Kajukembo Association, and we've done great things, man, through the years and the decades. I appreciate everything that you've done for me, sir, for our students, and worldwide, man. Just the things that you've been able to do with your lifelong martial artist. I mean, I think you've been doing this for how long now?
I started in 1967.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you were not born.
Was it, yeah, that's back when the world was in black and white, right?
Oh, yeah, we used to fall off the end of it.
But not just your martial arts and all the things that you've done, you're also a psychologist. I'll let you say a little more about that, and I really like how you get a little deeper into the thoughts and the feelings and, the ways that we can add empowerment and just a better understanding of life, right?
So, yeah. It's interesting because Senior Grandmaster Sam Allred, who was my teacher, he had his master's in psychology, which is really interesting.
Oh, that is
interesting. He had his master's in psychology. And it was interesting, his master's thesis was on music and psychology, and my doctoral thesis was on music and psychology.
Wow.
And we never even discussed it. It was a very interesting story. But anyway, so when I started in 1967 at West Mesa High School, he was a science teacher. And it was really interesting because being a scientist, being a martial artist, and I think being a musician adds a different passion to the way people view the world. And so he sort of started me on the right foot, me and a lot of my colleagues, on the right foot. And he would even sort of describe things in ways that sort of opened it up broader than just fighting. So there's really a lot of scientific sort of
examples.
Stuff. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. It's somewhat similar to Grandmaster Jay Berkey's interpretations of it. And so when I started doing martial arts, and tournaments were okay, I can't say that it really sparked me, but when I started understanding more about street self-defense and sexual assault self-defense and domestic violence self-defense, that's when I thought, wait a minute, this is where my passion is understanding that better and more clearly. And so Mr. Allred would always have us do, in those days they called them women's self-defense classes, and so we would teach cheerleader groups and nursing groups and people like that. And I started to realize the need, which was a real need, a day-to-day need, which now is continuing to be there. And so I started teaching, I moved to San Francisco where I was playing music there, and I met my Wing Chun teacher, Grandmaster Chris Chan, and he was amazing teacher. And the style of Wing Chun, which I was introduced to by Grandmaster Eric Lee back in 1970, and I started to realize, well, this is an art that really I can take to and I understand more clearly, and it was also invented by a woman. And the name Wing Chun means beautiful springtime. And so applying Wing Chun, which is an art that doesn't require a 250-pound samurai to do, and so it was a very practical, applicable art. And so I started to use some of the theories and constructs of Wing Chun, combining it with Kajukembo into understanding and educating myself more in the idea of sexual assault, self-defense, domestic violence, anger, things of that nature where people were dominating, coercing, and attempting to manipulate others. And realizing that some of the people who I would be teaching were not going to be martial artists. They would not be in a club like yours and say, I want to be an MMA fighter or a full contact fighter, but they wanted to defend themselves. And so that's when I started to incorporate very closely the idea of the psychology of the aggressor, the psychology of the person defending, and the dynamic between the two. And so in 1984, I was hired to teach at a psychiatric hospital. and we would do a lot of really intense interventions with sexual abuse survivors, where I would pad up gear and they would literally come after me.
Wow.
And so we would do a lot of, after the fight, and they got to do basically whatever they wanted. I really learned to fight then. Okay, that was very intense, because they meant it. And then we would process afterwards, which leads us to what you were saying a minute ago. Once you've reached your limit on your emotion, because emotion does not go from 0 to 100 and stay at 100. It goes 0 to here, to there, to here, and eventually will come back down. So what you do is, in the process of that, when they started to escalate emotionally and they were exerting themselves and they would get really tired, at that point in time, and they said, okay, I need to stop right now. That's when the processing would occur.
So you guys had basically study psychology of allowing these people survivors to get physical, to basically attack. And then it was a communication of how did that feel, or why, or this, and then to understand it.
Right. Yeah. Post intervention, after the intervention itself, and then we would ask various questions like, what were you thinking when that happened? What were you feeling emotionally when that happened? What were you feeling physically when that happened? Depending on how they were abused, we would talk about that aspect of where it was happening in their body, because that's a very heavy thing. Yeah. So certain times I would not grapple with them because that was what occurred to them. Yeah, too much. And then, but we would allow them to do whatever they wanted, and so we were now dealing with the dynamics of their physical self, because emotions are locked in the body, and that unlocks them. And when it unlocks them, you don't quite know where that's going to go. Some were medicated, some had meltdowns afterwards, some felt free afterwards. So it depends. We were fortunately in an environment, a psychiatric environment, where we could keep them safe. So we never had anybody, and at that time insurance companies were a little more creative and allowed us to do that. They don't allow that too much now, unfortunately. But so that's what really sparked my interest and understanding of
that's deep.
Sexual assault, self-defense. That's my second book I wrote, was on that in particular, which is my approach to sexual assault, self-defense. But a lot of the information I garnered from seeing that and working with survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, even street violence. And I thought, okay, there's something more to kicking and punching. There's something more to it. What's the psychology of it? What's the physical dynamic of it? What's even the cultural differences? I've taught on the reservations.
I mean, so what are the things? So many questions, but that you found the most. I mean, from the result of that, the thoughts and the feelings, and the communication on what they were feeling, what was going on.
Well, it's interesting because my theoretical approach to therapy is called cognitive behavioral therapy, and that came about 1970. Person by the name of Aaron Beck, and Dr. Beck, he realized that behavioral therapy was really good. Behavioral therapy was, if a kid touches a stove, you teach them how not to do that, or the old Skinner box stuff where they would, train rats to do so. Anyway, so there was the behavioral component. And then Dr. Beck thought, well, wait a minute, there's thinking going on here. It's not just a behavioral thing. So behavioral was good, but if you combine the cognitive with the behavioral, in other words, within the cognitive and the behavioral, in the middle is something. That's emotion. And so emotion will be, it'll be generated from a thought. So if you get a distorted thought, like that person doesn't like me, we don't know that or not. Let's say with road rage, okay, that person doesn't like me, or he tried to run me off the road and kill me, so now I'm mad, my action, thought, emotion, action, my action is to run into his car with my vehicle.
Based off a distorted thought.
Distorted thought moderates an emotion and a behavior. Moderate meaning determines the direction of it. It determines the direction of an action. So if you have a distorted thought, which often happens, a distorted thought, with us, we do that all the time. There's magical thinking, distorted thinking, cognitive dissonance, and all of the stuff. And sometimes we look for the things that match how we feel, because if we can find the thing that matches how we feel, even if we feel bad, we feel better about that emotion, even if it's a bad emotion. No, I
Justify it.
Yeah, I felt great after I got angry. I vented. I got it out of me. No, you didn't. You're wearing handcuffs right now, buddy. How are you feeling better?
Your arm's broken.
Exactly. You're in jail for a while. Yeah. So So not to get too much into the weeds with it, but for example, when I'm teaching my classes, or some of the things I hopefully will integrate tomorrow into our training, is whether you're training, whether you're in a fight, whether you're in a match, whatever, if your thoughts are not in control, and remember the 3 levels of learning in Kajukembo: primitive, mechanical, spontaneous. Primitive, animal fighting. Okay, that could get you someplace. Not bad. Some good street fighters or animal fighters, right? Primitive, mechanical is your kids who are learning good forms and doing all these things, but can they apply them in the street? Not till they become a spontaneous fighter. Spontaneous fighter is a combination of our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors working in unison, just like this yin and yang around my neck. It's working in a balance. And that's what I try to do when I teach, to understand where the person's coming from. If I know the physical limitation, we start with that. That's the easiest thing to deal with. Do this exercise.
Modification.
But what are you thinking when you do it? Just like that's why meditation is so powerful for people. If you could learn to get rid of what we call monkey mind, okay, and your mind isn't going every place, because you change some really good fighters. If they're not directed on that fight, they're going to lose that fight.
Right.
Because the thoughts are now we're in control of our thinking, which controls our emotion, which directs and moderates our behavior to be our best.
Yeah, the mindset and the shift.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. How do you, it's so interesting. How do you teach people to defend themselves without fighting? So it's based off communication and clear thoughts. And you're always so calm, man. And I've known you for a long time, and we've done a lot of things together. The story when we were in Mexico City on the fake call that you had of somebody saying that they had your daughter and they were going to kill
sister,
her.
Yeah.
And through that whole thing, I mean, you were so calm and in control and things. But anyway, so a lot of, like you said, a lot of people don't want to, or why would you fight if you don't have to? The art of fighting without fighting, right?
Exactly.
So what is the correct communication?
Well, the communication. Well, that's a great question. You start internally. In other words, if you internal the negative, you own it. If you don't internal the negative, that person's saying these things to me. If I own that, it is now mine and I have to deal with it. When you're confronted with a situation, let's use that situation where the person said he kidnapped my sister. The first thing I do is I breathe as deeply as I can. I make sure that my shoulders aren't trying to hide in my ears. That's right. Because if the physical self takes over, look at an angry person. What's the first thing you see? Fist clenching, teeth clenching, all of this. Look at a cat. What's the first thing that happens? Okay? And so that could be more fear-based than anger-based, but still the bottom line is an emotion that we're not in control of. But we learn to control that. So the second something is happening, and this is good for people. You're sitting I'm writing my 4th book right now on anger. And it has a lot to do with sitting in a traffic jam with traffic all around you. You can't do anything. Why is everybody honking their horns? Distorted thought. Nothing is going to change.
It didn't change, right?
Nothing is going to change. Okay. And so, so starting with myself, never internalize the negative. Like, you don't go into a match saying that guy's going to kick my butt.
Right.
You just internalized a belief system that you're now going to hold on to, because you said it and now you're trying to manifest it. So no, I've trained, I know what I'm doing, my teacher's behind me, I'm going to direct everything into this one direction. I'm not going to be blind and I'm not going to be scared, I'm going to be centered. The second that happens, even the person you're dealing with will sense it. Mr. Allred, when we would go out, when we were fighting in tournaments, he would say, don't make eye contact with your opponent before the match. If you're going to shake his hand politely. Don't give him anything. And when you're fighting, always look at the chest. Never look at the eyes. You're looking at the eyes. If there's fear, he's going to sense it or she's going to sense it. You're looking at the chest. Now they have no idea. You're a blank slate. As they say at tabula rasa, you're a blank slate. They don't know who they're dealing with. And that's what
and
you
you
want.
got element of surprise. Plus, you're focused and in control.
Exactly. Right. You give them, you telegraph nothing.
Yeah.
Yet
You're wasting energy too doing those other things, right? Just focus on your job.
Good point. Yes, you're wasting energy. That's
right. So physically relaxing, having clear thoughts, right. And trying to eliminate or at least less negative thoughts. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, because you're still going to have them.
Right.
Everyone's going to have them.
And negative thoughts. I mean, that's interesting because that's under the category of distorted thoughts in many cases. Like I'm no good, or like the kid who says I'll never be as good as that kid who could do the helicopter kick. I can never do that. No, well, that doesn't matter. I mean, you do what you maximize what you have. Like you've met one of our black belts, Mrs. Abeta, who is a 6th degree, 86 years old.
Still trains with everyone.
5 days a week. Mm-hmm. She shows up. She stumbles. She may fall. She may do this and that, and she just trains and trains. That's it. And so it's real important to follow your heart and bring your brain along for the ride. Okay, because you want to do that if you feel it, but you've got to think about what you're doing. And so one day she may call and say, you know what, I can't make it tonight because this knee is really hurting. Great, she's using her brain, but she hasn't stopped training. So that's a real important component of that. And we have a long line of people we've, from our club, who we're very proud of, who've done a lot of things like that. Yeah, right. And our system, and yourself included. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's powerful that everybody we could all use a little bit more mind with the body, and the understanding, of that. I think we just kind of will tend to just focus more on the physical and lack the mental.
Right, exactly. And it's one real popular guru from the 60s, his name was Muktananda, and he used to say that his one bit of advice he would always give everybody was learn to get rid of what you don't have.
Learn to get rid of what you don't have.
Meaning these things that we think we have or that where we think we're weak, we embrace them and they become how we see ourselves. So if you don't have, so learning to get rid of what you don't have means I'm going to start every morning with that tabula rasa, with a clean slate. That's how I'm going to do it. I have other things backing me. I have my training. I have my, when I had my fake shoulder put in, this is all titanium. My training never stopped. Matter of fact, it increased because I knew I needed to make up for lost time on this. As a 71-year-old person, every birthday I ride a bicycle for the amount of years I've been on the planet. So this September will be 72. Not the brightest thing to do, okay? But it's how I challenge myself. And the only limitation you own is the one you've made.
Yeah.
There's no other limitation except the one you've created.
Yeah. You tell me you're 71 years old, man. I don't
85 maybe?
Yeah, I was thinking. I sure hope that I can be as youthful and healthy. And I mean, look at the average person your age and their conditions, right?
No, I have a few friends who are walking around and say funeral expenses. But it's like
yeah, that's awesome. Well, man, we're here for the weekend, and you're going to be teaching. I really appreciate that, man. You bring good value to our students, and it's a blessing for anyone that can step on the mat and have a class, taught by yourself. And so I appreciate that. We're going to hang out, have a little dinner banquet party, and
it's going to be a great time. One of my 6 degrees, Don Slack, came with me, and Don's
just a good guy. We had some good experiences.
Just got his knee surgery, so he's got a new knee. That's part of the being a martial artist is you end up with new body parts. It's really cool. And and tomorrow we'll be doing some Wing Chun Kajukembo. Economy of movement, economy of technique, and practical, applicable fighting, and then combining it with all these other stellar teachers you got here.
Yeah, right.
They'll put together a good package. It's going to be beautiful.
It is, and the variety and the different experiences. So many of the people will say very similar things, but in different ways.
Oh, exactly.
And then you might have two students who it went over their head, and then two others that got it because the other person said it differently. The connections.
Right. Even Bruce Lee said if you get 8 fighters to see one fight, they'll all have a different remedy.
Yeah. Right.
That's what you'll see tomorrow. So it'll be fun.
Definitely. Well, Mr. Chavez, I appreciate everything as normal, and you guys you're pretty easy to find in Albuquerque, New Mexico, around there, and we'll continue to do what we're doing with the American Kajukembo Association.
It's going to be good, man. Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you,
appreciate
sir. I
it. Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
All right.
Thanks, guys.